Eye opener. Grow more, buy less. For years, I've been recommending that people ditch their lawns in favor of victory gardens. The people to whom I said this thought I was being silly at best and fear-mongering at worst. I wonder, given the cost of food these days, if they still believe I'm wrong. I wonder as I drive around and see the hundreds of thousands to millions of acres of wasteful lawns, if communities might benefit by growing food instead. Doesn't supplementing your groceries with food you or your neighbors have grown yourselves sounds pretty good these days? Consider this. Bill Gates owns more farmland, at least in America, than anyone else. Now consider the implications of one man controlling a majority of farmland. Imagine the possibilities this has for the world in general and America specifically. Even if Gates was some benevolent leader of mankind, which he isn't, his singular control over our food supply would still be a bad idea. Let's give Mr. Gates the benefit of the doubt for now and say he has all of humanity's best interest at heart. Lucky us. At least until his kids inherit all that farmland. Will we be given the same access to food, bugs, or whatever other meat substitute Gates now offers when his kids rule? Should your kids be beholden to his kids? Maybe having such centralized control over the things we need to survive is not such a good idea. Let's look to Bill's past to predict his and our future. For decades, Americans were told how hard farming was. Decades. So much so that family farms, owned and operated for generations, were failing year after year. They simply could not keep up with the costs of maintaining their farm. Now nothing screams existential threat more to me than losing one farm after another. As a matter of fact, it's kind of odd how much the phrase existential threat is used in the news these days, but never in relation to farming and our food supply. One would think that generational farms dying off would be considered one of those existential threats. The only explanation I can offer is the following. When a population is supplied with those things it needs to survive, it cares little about those who are providing it. I imagine their train of thought would be, as long as we're fed, we don't care who's feeding us. The switch between a farm operated by people who have farming in their blood to corporations that only care about profits is subtle. Subtle, like boiling a live frog. The water's great. Get in. But I digress. In recent times, farming has become a corporately owned and controlled industry. That is, whatever Bill Gates doesn't own, which, once again, happens to be more American farmland than any other individual in America. For more information about corporately owned farmland, click the link below. According to that link, in 2017, 30% of farmland was owned by non-operators who leased the land to actual farmers. This sounds a lot like sharecropping, which was a system of farming used shortly after slavery was abolished. Does this sound like anything but a step in the wrong direction to anyone except me? Americans live in an economic system that is only 2 steps removed from one of the most brutal forms of slavery the world has ever known. A system of slavery so twisted that its impacts continued to be exhibited in the racism seen in the United States for a century, if not longer. Now, of the 2 steps we've taken away from slavery, we're moving 1 step back with the neo-feudalism that wealth inequality is making possible. Who does this benefit? Okay, let's step back. Maybe this all sounds hyperbolic. Maybe I've gone too far with my rhetoric. Or have I? Let's revisit the question as to whether Bill Gates owning so much farmland in America is a good or bad thing for humanity. The most succinct answer I can provide is that it's a bad thing. A more detailed assessment would be that it would be an astoundingly detrimental development which will have dire effects for decades to come. I base this conclusion on the behaviors Bill Gates has exhibited to date, a few of which I will cite here. 1. When Oxford University offered to provide the patent on their COVID-19 vaccine for free, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation urged the school not to do so. In response, Oxford signed an exclusive deal with AstraZeneca. For this story, click the link below. 2. Bill also opposed sharing the vaccine formula with poorer countries. A link to that story is also below. He opposed sharing with poorer countries while saying we needed to vaccinate our way out of the COVID pandemic and pushing for vaccine mandates. 3. Bill Gates made $500 million on a $50 million investment on the mRNA vaccine technology, a technology he later denounced once he had sold and realized his profits from the vaccine. And worse still is the fact that Gates then invested in a nasal spray technology he hoped would replace the COVID vaccine. Another testament to his moral fortitude, or lack thereof, is that he frequently visited Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. This was not before Epstein was accused of being a pedophile who used underage girls to trade sexual favors for money, power, and pleasure. This was not before Epstein was tried for such crimes. Bill Gates visited Epstein's island of abuse after Jeffrey had been convicted and served time for his crimes. And if you're still not convinced that Bill Gates might have some ulterior motive, consider the fact that he is funding research that seems to control the weather. This is not conspiracy theory or hyperbole. This is fact as evidenced by the search results provided below. Also provided below is an article in Forbes that raises concerns about Bill Gates funding research on a way to block the sun. If this doesn't sound like megalomaniacal to you, what would? It sounds like Dr. Evil from an Austin Powers movie. Now someone please tell me how a man with Bill's history could ever be trusted with a commodity required for the survival of the entire human race? Then explain to me why Gates would even want to own so much farmland when the news for decades has been how difficult it is to make a living as a farmer. Other than controlling the fate of anyone who wants to eat, what did and does Gates know that told and tells him that owning farmland in the 21st century is a winning venture? From his reluctance to share vaccine technology, which we all know is not of a sense of charity, to his desire to control nature, what tells us he's a benevolent philanthropist? Could it be that he understands the amount of control one holds when one controls something everyone needs to live? Should one man, especially a man like Bill Gates, hold the fate of so many in the palm of his hands? Let's ask the girls from Epstein's Island to answer that question. As for the way farmers are being treated around the world, check back here tomorrow. It's not good. To find out other ways you're being screwed by your current leaders, check out the posts on this blog daily. Learn about the biggest and worst issues that America and its people face today. You can also check in to learn about those issues that America and its people will face in the near and distant future. If, however, you would like to learn about possible solutions to either mitigate the worst impacts of these issues or solutions to avoid them altogether, keep listening. The problems we face are not as complicated as so many leaders and news reports claim. They are man-made and are only claimed as complicated so those who are responsible can maintain control. For example, there is a persistent argument that moving government is like turning a cruise ship around. It is supposedly a long process that can only be achieved incrementally. While this may be true for laws and policies that benefit the majority of Americans, it does not seem to be so for that smallest of American minorities. When one examines the policies and laws that benefit that minority known as the elite or the rich, the speed at which those laws are passed is exponentially faster. While most of us sit on the deck chairs waiting for the Titanic to avoid the myriad of icebergs of which we seem to continually run afoul, the elite ride comfortably in speedboats. If, according to our Constitution, all men are created equal, why do the rich live quite different lives than the rest of us? Where is our speedboat? In 2018, Chris Osman wrote a book highlighting the problems humanity would face if more power, wealth, and control were funneled to a small group of individuals, groups, or organizations. In that book, Mr. Osman provided solutions, from himself and others, to the inevitable problems we would all face. In it, he also provided a means for the public to analyze, compare, and contrast the words and deeds of those we've chosen to follow against our real-world experiences. To this end, Mr. Osman provides the means for readers to disseminate information as provided by their news sources of choice, their elected officials, and any other authority they choose to follow. The book, titled Solutions, Enough Complaining. Let's Fix America, offers a means to hold leaders up, not just to a higher standard than is currently accepted, but to one that will improve lives. Nowadays, the grass is never greener. Click the link below and get your copy today.